Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by Hoa Xuande, the breakout star of the HBO limited series, The Sympathizer, which you can watch now, HBO. I was looking at other interviews you've done, and in another one, you compare getting this lead part to winning the lottery, I think you said. So I guess I found that like really interesting. I guess like once the jubilation and surprise maybe wore off, I guess what was the first thing you did to get ready after winning the lottery, basically?
Yeah.
What's the next day? Yeah.
It's funny because yeah, I think for like about 2 days I went and I visited my mom and we kind of like got together and I flew down to Melbourne, which is because I'm Australian, I kind of feel like I have to give a backstory. I'm Australian. I live in Sydney. They live in Melbourne. Different states, different cities. I flew back to just to sort of like lap up the moment with them. But yeah, and then I think we had a great time just like letting it all sink in. But then I think it dawned on me that I'm gonna have to do this. So that's when it like the dreading and the daunt like really set in. I think a couple of days after when I was like, okay, great, you won the lottery, but what are you going to do with your money?
Yeah. You mentioned like I know you're from Australia. You mentioned like so you have this. I was thinking of this too. You have like this flawless American accent in the show, so you have to
Right.
do that, and then also speak Vietnamese obviously fluently. And I read like that was not
Yeah.
necessarily something you had done a lot previously. So you have to learn basically two different dialects or like
Yeah.
be more fluent in them. And I guess like yeah, like I mean, I think people watching the show, if maybe this is the first time they've seen you on TV, would never realize that you're not, that you're from Australia or you just don't have like your American accent is so great. And I guess
Yeah.
like how did you like I guess
Yeah.
like how did you do all that? It's like flawless accent work. I guess like how did you do that to get that right?
Yeah, no, of course. Like even now, like I'm having to like figure out, hang on, where am I sitting with my accent? Because like I'm here in the States right now, but when I do interviews, I'm trying to lean into, being I'm Australian, right? But every now and then it slips and like I slip back and forth all the time. But I really had to try and drill the American accent, and I came into production just really in the accent, and I was working and I spoke to everybody, and I kind of lived in the American accent for the entirety of the shoot for like 6, 7 months. And there were people on the crew who didn't know that I was Australian because yeah, I just stayed in it the whole time. So I think that really helped me just to perfect the accent. But then obviously the Vietnamese, I grew up hearing the language, but never really speaking it because, yeah, I just never, shamefully, I never really sought a need for it. But yeah, I had a basic grasp of it, enough to get by. Like, where's the bathroom? How do I get to the train station? That sort of stuff that you find in like a tourist guide. Um, but they put me through a 2-week crash course to really get my language abilities up to speed, to recognize words, to be able to speak and all that sort of stuff. So I came into this really at a level where it wasn't at the level I needed to be at, and they really supported me in just getting to where I needed to be. And then, yeah, I guess what you're seeing is just a lot of days and nights just drilling and drilling and drilling.
And you don't even as a viewer, you don't even know because it's so natural. It just seems so effortless, right? Like I
Oh,
think that's like
thanks.
a great testament to your work. I love I mean, this show I think is like truly fascinating. I absolutely loved it. The captain, such a complex character. Obviously, you're playing a character who is basically himself playing a character. And I guess
Right.
like kind of like, yeah, how did you approach those that kind of complexity and stuff? Obviously, you have the book and the source material and stuff, but I guess how did you kind of approach thinking of him and like yeah, playing
Yeah,
that double agent type thing. I just find all that like
of
really
course.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So like, I think a lot of times when we think of spy and being a double agent and, like it's as if we're hiding behind a mask and we're lying all the time, which is essentially, what the character is. But, for me, what's more interesting is why we do that and why a character would choose to do these things. And so for me, I think it was really important to get to the heart, the core of who this person was. And so like a lot of my research and I guess deep diving and character building was about figuring out the emotional qualities, the psychological qualities of what this person um, is motivated by. And so, I read a lot of accounts and stories from, you know, from the war, but especially from the Vietnamese experiences of the war, because a lot of the times those stories get missed when we retell stories within this period, this era that is so significant to both countries, really. And so I read a lot of those stories, and I read a lot of these stories were also, just so beautifully articulated in Viet Thanh Nguyen's book, and so I tried to carry all of the emotions of those struggles of what people felt and the trauma of what those people felt into this character, because realistically, if those people felt that way, people during a time like my character would have felt like that way as well. So that was the psychological part of the character, and then building the emotions of like, what are his beliefs, why does he do the things that he does, who does he truly trust, and once you try and really figure those things out, and the people that are around him, his friends, and his love interests, and people he looks up to, the people who have mentored him, when you try and figure out all those little dots on the board of like, who does he trust, who does he believe in, who does he view as the enemy, that sort of stuff, it naturally and innately comes to you as to why a person would act the way that they do in these specific situations. And so once I kind of like weaved all these things together, naturally you can't help but be intimidated. You can't help but put on a face. You can't help but look at a certain person and be like, I trust you. You can't help but look at a certain person and be like, I'm going to destroy you. And that's how I shaped this performance, working from the inside out.
Was it hard for you to like, I mean, the story obviously kind of where the captain is telling the story, so it's kind of going flashbacks, right? Was it, I don't know this, did you guys, I doubt you guys shot it linearly, right? So like, was it hard to
Yeah.
like make sure you jump back, like keeping straight where you are emotionally and stuff, or the characters
Yeah,
emotionally?
no, of course. That was probably one of the biggest challenges of shooting this thing. I remember reading the script and just going, oh my God, like, my script is full of notes, and a lot of them have a lot of it has to do with the timeline as well. Hang on, at this point, what do I know? Where am I going? At what information is has already been revealed to the audience? What information has been revealed to me? And so there were shooting days where I think between us and director Park and the first AD and and Don McKellar, we were like, hang on, let's just take a break for a second. Um, in this scene, what does the captain know at this stage? And what do the other characters in this scene know at this stage? There was a lot of that actually, but I think that's the beauty of things like this. It's like it's an espionage thriller, but it's littered with clues and moments and hints. And if you specify those moments and you make those moments very detailed, it gives the viewer some richness to view again and again and again, and work out those moments as to, oh my God, that's why that moment happened in that way, because there was information retained and there was information revealed. But yeah, the timeline was the trickiest part of shooting this thing, and it definitely confuddled me for a little bit as well.
I mean, again, you don't even as a viewer can't even tell. It's really great stuff. It's so seamless. I
Yeah,
find like I was talking about when I think you're also your performance is so charming and charismatic. You have like a great like you just carry yourself so well in the character. It's like it reminded
oh,
me. I was like this. I don't even know if you thought of like other like. I was talking to a friend of mine. Where like it's like Edward Norton in Fight Club, kind of. I don't know why I
yeah,
thought of that, but like you have this
yeah,
really great
cool.
presence, and I was just like, man, you absolutely crush this
Yeah.
stuff. So it's like
I
really
mean,
cool.
I never intentionally, you know, modeled myself off Ed, but that is a huge compliment.
Good. Oh, and, you mentioned like how like the Vietnam War in this time period, and especially like from Hollywood perspective. Obviously, like the fourth episode is so fantastic. Especially as someone who like has seen a lot of those movies and like has like at least like read about that era and stuff. Obviously, I just think that episode is so great. It's also the first one I think without director Park, right? I think Fernando Mariellos directed that
Yes,
episode.
yes. Yeah.
So I guess like, hey, what like how was it to actually do that episode, which is such a satire of like how Hollywood is like
Yeah.
treated the Vietnam War, and like yeah,
Yeah.
how was that whole how did that whole like how did you
Um,
approach that at all? Yeah,
I mean, it's so funny because as an actor, it's hilarious. It was so fun to do because we're playing all these, I was seeing all these tropes that I had watched in movies for a long time, come to the forehand, and I'm watching this, and we're sort of retelling it, and we're redoing these moments, and it's just hilarious. But as a character, obviously, as a the captain is the consultant on this film, it would be hugely frustrating because, you know, especially when you're trying to tell stories of your own people, and you're trying to keep the dignity of what happened to the people that had to experience all of this devastation during that time. It's so, it's so frustrating and outrageous to have a certain, an entity of people, Hollywood, tell you how you were supposed to be and what your story is in line with someone else's story and how insignificant your story is. You know, that's infuriating. And so for my character, I think I had to just remember that back in the day, when I guess these subjects were not as nuanced and, you know, certain narratives were being told in a very specific way, it was hugely frustrating that it just didn't matter how much you felt like your stories were important, that they were made to feel so insignificant. Yeah.
Yeah. You also have in that episode you get to meet, or I think we had met him previously, but Robert Downey Jr. obviously plays four characters. I'm sure people
Yeah.
watching this know. I think the relationship with the captain and that Nikos as the director is
Yeah.
definitely like the most combative, I would say, of those four.
Yeah.
And I
For
guess I was
sure.
wondering, like, in terms of like, I'm sure actors have different chemistry with other like different actors, right? But like you're
Yeah.
playing Downey is playing four different parts, and so like I'm assuming was like how did your chemistry with him
Yeah.
evolve over the part? You know what I mean? Like it's like I'm
Yeah.
sure like it wasn't the same every time, but I guess
Of
like
course.
how did that work? I guess and
Yeah,
like
no, of course. That's a great question. Like, obviously in the, the third episode, towards the end of the third episode, where we get to meet all of his characters in the one room talking to each other, and that's a show in itself. But yeah, like, working with Robert, it's so fun and silly a lot of the time because he's just very spontaneous. He's very witty. He's got like improvisations coming out of his, mouth, at any given time, and you're kind of just going along with that, and you're working with him in that way. But you kind of then you have to sort of pull yourself back and remember, hang on, what are my relationships to each of these characters? And that's basically the foundation of how I worked with each of his characters. I would remind myself that, hang on, okay, where in the story are we, and how do these characters affect me on at this part of the journey? And then I have a very distinct relationship to each of his characters, and so I have to sort of hone myself into what each person means to me. You know, the professor is really my mentor, and I have a liking to him in that way because he's supportive of me. And then, I've got the congressman who's completely, a nobody to me. He's unknown to me. I have my judgments that I reserve from him, but he is basically the most outside of all the characters. And then I have the Claude character, who is obviously my sort of CIA handler, but I have this working relationship with him, but I am constantly on edge with him. He's one of the most dangerous characters that I have to work with, and so he puts me at my most tense. And then you've got obviously the auteur character who's just absolutely antagonistic. There's no way about it. Like I just hate the guy. So it's not hard to be able to work out that relationship with him.
yeah, it's really
Yeah.
great, and I think your work with him is it's really fun, and like you said, like he is so good on the show. I think like is like really
Yeah.
remarkable, and you're so well. The other relationship I wanted to ask you about was Alan, your captain's relationship with Sonny, played by Alan Trautman. I think
Yes.
that is really great as well, and obviously will kind of evolve as the season goes forward. But I
Yeah.
guess like just like in general, like how did you view that kind of relationship, and like yeah, like
Yeah.
what like
Yes.
yeah
No, like, it's really interesting because, as revealed in even Sonny's backstory later on, as we'll discover. Well, hang on. Well, episode 5 just aired, so we know this now.
yeah
But yeah, he came to America just to study like the captain. It's just like I think the captain and Sonny share very similar beliefs and values. They're both, uh, left-leaning communist sympathizers, but they approach their beliefs in very different ways, and they both, carry the weight of their beliefs in very different ways. And so, you know, for the captain, he was, I guess, very practical about it. He, you know, he felt the need of the cause calling for him back at home, and he went right away and back home to do that. Whereas Sonny's sort of uh, did it in a way of, you know, he did it in the way of, I guess, I don't know how to explain it, but you know, he tried to better it from the States in the way of education, in the way of hopefully lifting his people from America, being the voice of his people from the States. So it's sad that they both actually see eye to eye on so many different things, but they couldn't see eye to eye within each other.
Mhm.
Um, and as a result of that, their relationship is actually quite dangerous in
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, yeah, like, I think that's the best way that I can explain it. It's like, it's unfortunate that two people can see eye to eye on so many different things and their beliefs are so aligned, but they just can't seem to operate together.
Right. And I think that speaks to a lot of certain things we see now, right? It's very
Yeah,
relevant to, I think, the conversations people have now. I guess I know we have to
yeah,
wrap up, but I know this is a limited series. It's fantastic and has a very definitive end, but there is a sequel book, right? That was
yeah.
written. Have you thought about like this, if they ever did another one, or
Yeah,
how you would like
look,
to do
I
the captain
mean,
again?
yeah, look, it hasn't escaped me. You know, uh, I would love to continue telling this story, and you know, the what's presented in the second book is even more wild and crazy and heartbreaking and hilarious. If we're so lucky to have that opportunity, I would jump on board in a heartbeat. But you know, I guess right now we'll just see how this first season goes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's great. I mean, as a fan
Yeah,
of the show, I think
but
it is great.
yeah,
So
there's so much. Yeah, I've been just astounded by the response and the reviews and the reactions of people to the first season so far. And honestly, like, you know, when we did this project, it was just, you know, obviously telling a story that hasn't been seen before from a different perspective, but just to have, I guess, the world respond to it in a very positive way has been really reinforcing this notion that it's time to tell stories that are different from the ones that we're used to seeing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think you said it great. Hoa Xuande, star of Sympathizer. You can watch it on HBO. Thank you so much for doing this.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris, for having me.